When Ethan handed me the divorce papers for the 19th time, I finally agreed. His little darling was throwing a fit about wanting to be official. She couldn't wait any longer. And honestly, neither could I. I was pregnant, and the kid wasn't his. After signing the papers, the first thing I did was snap a photo and text it to Ethan. Signed. You want your assistant to come get them? 20 minutes ticked by. Ethan's text thread was as dead as a doornail. I was about to call a courier when I saw Ethan, a little out of breath, standing at my door. He actually came himself. Figures. His little princess had been making a whole scene about getting a ring for 6 months. Guess he was desperate to get this over with. All right, what kind of stunt are you trying to pull? He snapped, his voice cold and impatient. You're getting every single cent we agreed on. 3 years ago, Ethan had given me a wedding. Since then, I'd been his wife, in name only. I'd been by his side, from broke and struggling to where he was now, successful and loaded. But for the last 6 months, he'd been obsessed with ditching me, just to make room for his little songbird. He had revised our separation agreement like it was a school project 19 times. I hadn't liked any of the previous versions. This time I'd signed without a peep, and he was suddenly suspicious. I chuckled, handing him the papers. He suspiciously opened them up, saw my signature, and his face fell. Summer, you actually agreed to this? I stared at him, puzzled. He used to say he hated it when I was clingy, hated my jealous fits. Now that I wasn't causing a scene, going along with his plans, taking the money and running, he looked like he was more pissed off than ever. Was he hoping I'd break down and beg him to stay? I smiled a little. Isn't this good for you? You can finally marry Tiffany and I can get my life back on track. The agreement covered everything. House, cars, company shares, of the whole shebang. He really went all out. And I was happy to take it all. After all, I was the one who'd been with him through the lean years. Why should I just let some other woman reap what I'd sown? Now it was settled. With my own earnings over the years, plus what he was paying out, I could travel the world starting tomorrow and still live comfortably for the rest of my life. The love was gone, but at least I still had a ton of cash. Ethan looked at me, his expression conflicted, almost as if he wanted to say something else. Just then, a soft, girly voice interrupted us. Summer, thank you for letting us be together. Tiffany, Ethan's prized little songbird. She was a small-town girl with big ambition. She got a standard 4-year degree, and just getting a job at Ethan's competitive company was a long shot. She'd landed the job of personal assistant in the president's office in a matter of 3 months. She was incredibly dedicated, especially when it came to seducing Ethan. Ethan said she was innocent and sweet, always worried that I'd hurt her. But what innocent and sweet woman sleeps with a married guy and then sends the pictures to the wife? I used to fall apart, cry, make a scene. I even blew it all up online, only for it to disappear without a trace the next day. Ethan always had a way of making things go away. Funny how he'd ended up using his skill set against me. I was over it. I gave them both a tight smile, not saying another word. Got the papers, you leaving yet? I asked, my voice flat. This house was in my name. Ethan barely came around anymore since he'd started playing the field. I wanted to disinfect the whole place if they stayed 1 second longer. Ethan's face darkened. Summer, your games aren't gonna work with me. You signed, so don't come crawling back. Then he grabbed Tiffany's hand and started leading her toward the door. Hold up. I called out to Ethan. He turned back, giving me an I knew it look. Like I couldn't let him go after all. But I just said, don't forget to transfer the money, and get the deed to the property changed over ASAP. His face went blank for a second, then his jaw tightened. You're sure in a hurry? In a hurry? Yeah, I was. I was pregnant, and not by him. The sooner I was out of his life, the better. I made an appointment for a prenatal checkup, never imagining that I would run into Ethan and Tiffany at the hospital. He was gently leading her along, holding her hand. Tiffany was chattering away, and he was listening with that lovey-dovey look in his eyes. They were so close, it was like there was no room for anyone else. Memories flooded back. There was a time when he'd looked at me like that. So long ago. The last time I saw that look in his eyes was when I miscarried. I was 4 months pregnant back then. He'd been sleeping with his first mistress. She was a firecracker, that one. She'd walked right up to my doorstep, demanding I make room for her. I called her a slut, and she told me the one who wasn't loved was the real homewrecker. I guess I wasn't handling it well, and she shoved me hard. And just like that, the baby was gone. I was covered in blood and rushed to the emergency room. When I woke up, the first thing I saw was a guilty-looking Ethan. His eyes were full of regret. He was holding my hand, crying and saying, I'm so sorry, Summer. I was a jerk. Hit me, I deserve it. I slapped him. He didn't flinch, just took it. When I'd calmed down, he said, just this once, okay, Summer, please give me a chance to fix things. We can have another baby. He got rid of that girl and went back to being my sweet, loving boyfriend. But it only lasted about 6 months. 6 months later, there was a new woman on his arm, and then another and another. They were all young, fresh faces, none of which I could remember the names of before he moved on. Tiffany had been the longest-lasting one. Running into them at the OB/GYN was a little awkward. I turned around, wanting to leave, but Tiffany called out to me, "Summer, what a coincidence." She was practically hanging off of Ethan. Her cheeks were flushed. She looked all shy. "I'm pregnant, here for a checkup." I just stared at her. Ethan looked at the appointment slip in my hand, his brow furrowed. "What kind of appointment do you have here?" I gave him a cold smile. "Ethan, you should probably avoid getting too personal about your ex-wife's medical issues in front of your new girlfriend." He seemed annoyed. He actually pushed Tiffany to the side, grabbing my wrist. "Summer, I'm still your man, and you're suddenly at an OB/GYN. I have a right to know." I stared at him, a little sarcasm creeping into my voice. "You're my man? Are you sure about that? We had a wedding, but the marriage records say I've been single all along." Ethan froze like he just realized something, his eyes darkening even more. That's right, our wedding had been romantic and over the top. To the outside world, I was his one and only Mrs. Ford. Especially with all the business deals and shares we'd tangled ourselves into. But who knew the truth? We'd never gone to the marriage bureau. Every time I brought up filing for the marriage certificate, Ethan was called into meetings or needed to fly out of the country. His time was just so valuable. Too valuable to spend 30 minutes signing a marriage license with me. But when it came to a breakup, we were fighting tooth and nail over money and shares. My wrist was hurting, but he wouldn't let go. Finally, my name was called. "Summer, report to room 5. Ethan released me, looking very put out. I practically jumped past him and Tiffany into the exam room and locked the door behind me, not bothering to look at Ethan's dark expression. After checking my records, the doctor gave me some advice. He also mentioned bringing in the baby's father next time. "He's dead." The doctor stopped looking at my files and shot his head up, a sympathetic look in his eyes. He gave me a bunch of comforting words and I acted sad. I was tired and felt very sleepy. After returning home from the hospital, I crashed and went into a deep sleep. I had so many vivid dreams. At first, I dreamt of when I'd just graduated from college, when Ethan's family lost all their money and he'd been living on the streets. We lived in a tiny apartment and he hugged me, wrapped me in his coat, and held me against his heart. "Summer, when I make money, I swear, you'll never have to suffer. I'm going to hire 5 people at least, 1 to cook for you, 1 to do your laundry, 1 to make the bed." I felt his heart pounding in my ear. I was so young, I actually thought that love was all that mattered. Then he actually got back on his feet and became a success. And the people around him started multiplying. They all came and went, like they were loves that Ethan could never hold on to. Then there were the nightmares of broken glass, blood and me, crying hysterically. He looked at me with zero empathy and said, "Summer, you look pathetic when you act like this." At that moment I knew. The man I had been in love with was now someone I did not know. I woke up as it was getting dark. I got up, feeling sluggish. Then a voice startled me. I heard, "You're telling people I died. You're saying I'm the father of your baby and telling everyone I'm dead." I whipped my head around, looking for the voice. There, standing in front of the glass doors, was a man. The moonlight seemed to coat him in silver. The room was dark, without a single light on. If he hadn't spoken, I would never have noticed him. "Chad, what's the deal? You're trying to give me a heart attack." Chad chuckled at my words. He came over and picked me up. His body was warm, even through my pajamas. He massaged my back with a soft hand. When he spoke, his voice was full of helpless exasperation. "Who is the one over the top here? You, Summer. You sleep with me and then run away. And now you're planning to take my baby with you." Chad was right. I had planned on taking the baby and settling down in a small town, far from Ethan, and far from Chad. After all, the way we met wasn't exactly glamorous. It had been 3 months ago on my birthday. Ethan had told me he wanted to celebrate with me, one last time before we split. He booked a restaurant. The table was right next to the window so I could enjoy the city lights. He came to my place to pick me up. It felt as if nothing had changed between us. He set the cake down and lit the candles. "Make a wish." I closed my eyes and made a wish. I wish. 10 seconds maybe. When I opened my eyes, he was gone. Ethan was nowhere to be seen. I waited for a while, but he never came back. The waiter told me. Mr. Ford took a phone call and left. He said he'd paid the bill. "You're free to leave whenever." I looked at the burning candles, the melting icing. Happy birthday was just a mess of red. Finally, I let out a laugh. After leaving the restaurant, I took a cab to the harbor. When we were broke, with no money to go anywhere, Ethan would take me to the harbor. He always said even if he couldn't take me anywhere new, the ocean air was a nice change. The ocean was still there, but he'd moved on. I kept walking aimlessly, until a group of girls started screaming. "Oh my God, that is just so romantic." I looked up at the sky. The darkness lit up by 1,000 drones. They formed the words in a gorgeous cursive font. "Tiffany, I love you." A few seconds later, There were thousands of fireworks. It was gorgeous. People were saying, "Wow, who's that rich guy making the grand gesture?" Yet another day being just an NPC in someone else's story. I torturously went to my social media feed. I saw Tiffany's post. "True love is, whenever I say I want him, he'll put on a grand display of love." And the photo was of the drone message. When you hit rock bottom, you're not that different from a crazy person. I bought a lot of alcohol. There were too many people at the harbor. Ethan and Tiffany were surrounded by oblivious onlookers. They didn't even notice me. I watched them for a long time. Then I realized the number of empty bottles by my side, that I couldn't see straight. I knew I had to leave. I stumbled out of the harbor, trying to walk down the street, when I bumped into a man. "Watch out," he said, grabbing my arm to steady me. I looked up and saw him. Chad Stevenson. Tech CEO. Heir to the Stevenson Corp. We had a few business dealings. A lot of my success was because of his investments. He was the opposite of Ethan. There were never any women around him. People whispered about him being gay. He never denied it. Summer. He held me up, frowning. "What's with all the drinking?" He smelled good clean. Unlike Ethan, who was always covered in Tiffany's perfume. "Chad, people say you're into guys, is it true?" I don't know why I said it. My tongue felt numb, the alcohol probably. Chad froze. Then with a sigh he helped me into his Rolls Royce. Maybe it was that he looked good. Maybe it was the alcohol clouding my judgment. Or maybe I was just trying to get back at Ethan. I scooted closer to Chad and kissed him on the cheek. He stared at me, his eyes wide. His pale skin suddenly turned a faint red. I did something crazy and straddled him. "Chad, you want to give this a try with me?" I was way too close to him, my lips almost brushing his ear. He was so soft. I kissed him on the ear. His ear was warm. A hoarse voice came from above my head. "Summer, get a hold of yourself." I laughed. "I am in control. I know that you guys just want someone young and hot. One word, and you'll kick us out to the curb." I was feeling hot and wanted to go somewhere cool. He tensed, his eyes dark. I grabbed his face and kissed him. He didn't pull away this time. His lips were cool, with a hint of mint. He smelled so good. I was starting to feel dizzy, like I couldn't breathe. He held the back of my head with one hand, and wrapped his arm around my waist, forcing me to kiss him. A panel rose between the seats, blocking us off. He finally broke away, his voice hoarse. "Summer, I'm not into men. I also don't want anyone young." He was being slow. We were making out. Why was he talking about this? The alcohol was messing with my head. Before I could process that, he started the car. Soon we got to his place. Chad picked me up and carried me through the foyer, up the stairs and into a bedroom, before placing me on the bed. He stood there looking down at me. I stared at his lips, the ones I had just kissed, wet and swollen. And then I looked at his chest. A few buttons of his shirt were undone. His collarbone was so alluring. He looked like a male temptress. He smirked and pulled my hand under his shirt. "Summer, you want this?" "Yes, I want." When he got his answer, Chad came down on me, kissing me deeply. It was not like the other kisses, they were more intense. As if he was trying to claim me. His hot kisses moved all over my body. "Summer, do you like this?" My face was on fire. I wrapped my arms around Chad, tightly. I tried not to answer him, but Chad forced me to answer him. I buried my face in his neck and whispered, "Yes, ma'am." He kissed me with approval. And then I fell asleep in his arms. When I woke up the next day, he was gone. I knew what that meant. He was probably someone who didn't like drama. And honestly, neither did I. Since he was gone, I would act like nothing had happened. It was better for both of us. So I left. I also blocked his number and disconnected all ties, to avoid any awkward situations. As for any business deals, I'd have one of my people reach out. That way it would be all professional. After that, Chad and I didn't see each other. Until a few days ago when my period was late, I finally remembered. I hadn't taken a pill after that night. I bought a home pregnancy test. I took 5 of them, all positive. I was so confused. The doctors had said it would be hard for me to get pregnant again. And what difficulty? Chad had gotten me pregnant the first time. I was so shocked. Chad had a right to know. But his attitude, I wasn't sure. Just to be safe, I said nothing and decided to break up with Ethan and figure out my and the baby's future. But before I could, Chad showed up. "Summer, why'd you block my number?" His lips were close to my ear, his voice cold. His breath warm. "Did you regret sleeping with me?" The room was so quiet that the only sound was the rustle of the linen sheets and the steady deep rhythm of Chad's breathing against my neck. His hand was large, warm, and calloused in just the right places from handling technical hardware and competitive rowing. It rested firmly against the small of my back, pulling me an inch closer until the heat radiating from his chest soaked right through my thin silk camisole. "Did you?" he repeated, his voice dropping an octave, husky and dangerously patient. "Regret it?" I swallowed against the dryness in my throat, trying to regain my footing. I was used to dealing with Ethan's loud, petty temper tantrums. I knew how to put up walls against shouting and gaslighting. But Chad? Chad was calm water running over sharp stones, cool, deep, and impossible to push away. I didn't regret it, I managed to say, keeping my gaze locked on the silver moonlight pooling over his broad shoulders. I just thought it was a mistake, born of alcohol and bad timing. You left before sunrise. The unwritten rule of those situations is that whoever leaves first sets the tone. No drama, no strings. Chad let out a low, vibrating laugh that buzzed against my collarbone. He gently turned me around so that I was forced to look directly into his dark, obsidian eyes. I didn't leave to ghost you, Summer. I left at 5 in the morning to buy your favorite sourdough croissants from the bakery across town, and to personally fire the valet who let you wander into traffic the night before. He reached up, tucking a stray lock of hair behind my ear with infuriating gentleness. When I came back, the bed was cold. My driver told me you'd taken a cab, and when I dialed your number, the carrier informed me I'd been blacklisted. Do you have any idea how hard it is to track down a woman who runs her own logistics firm? You're the CEO of Stevenson Corp., I pointed out, a slight edge returning to my voice. If you wanted to find me, you could have done it in 10 minutes. I gave you space because I thought you needed to process your final split with Ethan, Chad murmured, his fingers trailing down to rest lightly on my flat stomach. His touch lingered there, feather-light yet burning, until my friend at the Central Medical Registry called to tell me a certain Miss Summer Vance just visited the OB/GYN, listed the father as deceased, and had an ultrasound booked under high privacy protocols. My breath hitched. Chad, is it mine? He asked. There was no accusation in his tone, no disgust, no panic, only a raw, grounded intensity that made my heart hammer wildly against my ribs. I looked at him, really looked at him. This was a man who held the city's tech sector by the throat, a man who had never been photographed with a scandalous headline, a man who could have had any socialite in the country. Yes, I whispered. It's yours. Just over 6 weeks. A slow, breathtaking smile broke across Chad's usually stoic face. His thumb brushed over my cheekbone, catching a stray tear I hadn't realized had fallen. Good, Chad said simply, leaning down to press a soft, lingering kiss to the corner of my lips. Then tomorrow morning, we're calling my lawyers your lawyers, and moving your things to my estate. Hold on, I said, putting my palms against his chest to push him back. Just because I'm pregnant doesn't mean you owe me a wedding or a domestic setup. Eve spent the last 3 years playing the invisible, loyal partner to a man who discarded me the second he made his first 100 million. I'm not trading one cage for another. Chad didn't fight my hands on his chest. He simply covered them with his own, holding them against the steady, thumping beat of his heart. Summer, Ethan is a boy who inherited a silver spoon, choked on it, and needed you to perform the Heimlich maneuver on his entire life, Chad said evenly. I'm a grown man. I don't need a caretaker, and I don't build cages. I've wanted you since the tech summit in Singapore 2 years ago, long before Ethan started publicly making a fool of himself with administrative assistants. I froze. Singapore. You barely said 10 words to me at that conference. Because you were wearing a ring, he replied softly. Even if the marriage certificate wasn't filed at City Hall, you believed in the commitment. I respect loyalty. But now that you've signed those papers, the field is clear. I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm asking you to let me take care of you and my child. Before I could form another rational argument, Chad's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He didn't look at it, but my phone on the vanity lit up simultaneously. A notification popped up from a real estate escrow app. Transfer notice. Property ID number 4092. The Grandview Villa has been successfully reassigned to Summer Vance, pending final sign-off from Ethan Ford. Right below it was a text from Ethan. I had the deed processed. You happy now? Tiffany wants the furniture from the guest suite. Have your people leave it on the curb by noon tomorrow, or I'm withholding the final stock dividend release. I stared at the screen, a cold smirk touching my lips. Chad glanced over my shoulder, read the message, and his eyes turned to chips of black ice. Leave the furniture on the curb? Chad asked, his voice deceptively smooth. He's been trying to nickel and dime me over the decor for 6 weeks. I sighed, tossing the phone aside. He thinks he's being generous by giving me the house we bought when his company was 5 minutes from liquidation. Chad picked up his own phone, tapped the screen twice, and held it to his ear. Julian. Chad spoke to his chief legal counsel. Ford Enterprises has a loan facility maturing with our banking syndicate next Thursday. What's the total principal? A brief pause. $85 million, Chad nodded. Call in the covenant audit first thing in the morning. If there's so much as a misplaced decimal point in Ethan Ford's operational cash flow, freeze his secondary credit line. He hung up, set the phone face down, and gathered me back into his arms as if he hadn't just casually dropped an economic nuclear bomb onto my ex's head. Now, Chad murmured, pulling the comforter over our shoulders. Get some sleep, mother of my child. Tomorrow, we go shopping for things that haven't been touched by Ethan Ford. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of freshly brewed hazelnut coffee and warm butter. For a brief, disoriented second, I thought I was back in the early days with Ethan waking up early to iron his shirts while he slept in. But then I opened my eyes and saw the clean, minimalist lines of my own bedroom, the sunlight streaming in, and Chad leaning against the doorframe wearing a crisp charcoal dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, holding a silver tray with decaf tea, oatmeal, and a plate of warm pastries. You're still here, I said, rubbing my eyes. I live here now if you'll have me, he replied smoothly, setting the tray across my lap. Or rather, you live with me starting this afternoon. The moving crew is downstairs. Chad, I haven't even packed my shoe collection. My staff packed it 20 minutes ago while you were sleeping like a log, he smiled, leaning down to brush a kiss against my forehead. Eat. You need the iron. I took a bite of the oatmeal. It was warm, perfectly sweetened with honey, and surprisingly comforting. For the first time in months, the morning nausea that usually threatened to turn my stomach inside out was entirely absent. My phone rang. The screen displayed Ethan Ford. I put it on speaker and set it on the nightstand. Summer. Ethan's voice exploded through the tiny speaker, laced with frantic fury. What the hell did you do? I took a slow sip of my tea. Good morning to you too, Ethan. Did the courier drop off the signed deed? To hell with the deed. Ethan barked. The Stevenson Trust's financial division just issued an emergency audit on our Series C debt. The bank froze my corporate liquidity. They're demanding collateral verification for the Northside Logistics hub. Did you go crying to your old business contacts to screw me over on the way out? I glanced at Chad. He was quietly cutting an apple into precise, even slices, his expression completely unbothered. Ethan, I said calmly, I'm a private citizen who signed your separation papers less than 24 hours ago. If your company's financial health is so fragile that a routine debt covenant audit puts you in a panic, perhaps you should have spent more time reviewing balance sheets and less time arranging drone shows for your assistant. A sharp gasp came from the background of Ethan's line. Tiffany was clearly listening in. Summer, don't you dare speak about Tiffany like that, Ethan yelled, though the crack in his voice betrayed his mounting panic. She's the future mother of my child. She's under doctor-ordered bed rest, and the stress you're causing is dangerous for the baby. Then take her off speakerphone, I replied dryly. And while you're at it, have your legal team wire the remaining $3 million in liquid settlement by 2 o'clock today. If it's 1 minute late, my attorney will file a lien against your personal stock holdings. You wouldn't dare. Chad reached over, picked up my phone, and brought it to his lips. Mr. Ford, Chad said, his deep resonant baritone cutting through Ethan's, screeching like a razor. This is Chad Stevenson. You have until 2 o'clock to fulfill the contractual terms of your separation agreement with Summer. If my legal department has to get involved, the $85 million credit line will be the least of your concerns. Have a productive morning. Chad tapped the red end button and tossed the phone onto the armchair. The silence in the bedroom was deafening. I stared at him, my mouth slightly agape. Did you really have to do that? He's going to lose his mind. Let him lose it, Chad said, handing me a slice of apple. He's been trading on your reputation and your logistics network for 3 years while treating you like a disposable placeholder. It's time he learned what happens when the placeholder is replaced by the owner of the board. By midday, my transition to the Stevenson estate in the hills was complete. The estate was an architectural masterpiece of limestone, glass, and sprawling gardens overlooking the Pacific coastline. Unlike Ethan's gaudy, newly rich penthouse, which had been decorated entirely in gold-trimmed velvet by Tiffany's dubious taste, Chad's home was elegant, quiet, and filled with the scent of cedar and sea salt. A team of private physicians, headed by Dr. Rebecca Aris, the chief of obstetrics at the city's premier private hospital, arrived at 3 in the afternoon for my comprehensive workup. Your progesterone levels are slightly low, which is common after a prior miscarriage, Dr. Aris noted, reviewing the ultrasound monitor where a tiny, flickering heartbeat pulsed like a brilliant star. However, the gestational sac is well implanted, and the fetal vitals are remarkably strong. With adequate rest, proper nutrition, and zero stress, this pregnancy should progress smoothly. Chad stood beside the examination bed, his eyes fixed on the black and white screen. The sharp, ruthless tech mogul who made Wall Street executives tremble looked completely spellbound. His fingers gently enclosed mine, squeezing with an intensity that bordered on reverent. "That's our baby," Chad murmured, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. "That's our baby," I echoed, feeling a strange, warm flutter in the center of my chest. For 3 years, I had believed that motherhood was a closed chapter for me, a dream that had died on the emergency room floor while Ethan's first mistress sneered in the doorway. But lying here, with Chad's warm hand holding mine and the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of life echoing through the speaker, the scars on my heart began to feel less like open wounds and more like distant memories. While I rested in the sunroom, Chad took a call in his study. 10 minutes later he returned, a discreet leather binder in his hand. "What is that?" I asked, looking up from my book. "A background dossier," Chad said, sitting opposite me on the chaise lounge. Mississippi Tiffany Lane." I raised an eyebrow. "You had her investigated?" "When someone tries to publicly humiliate the woman carrying my child, I make it my business to know everything about them," Chad said, opening the folder. "It turns out our innocent, wide-eyed small-town girl isn't quite as naive as Ethan thinks." I leaned forward, scanning the printed pages. "She wasn't an administrative assistant at her previous firm in Chicago," I read aloud, my eyes widening. "She was an associate in corporate public relations who was terminated for falsifying expense reports and having an affair with a senior regional director." "And there's more," Chad added, tapping a section highlighted in yellow. "Her medical records from 3 weeks ago. She visited a boutique fertility clinic in the suburbs. She's not pregnant, Summer. She was prescribed hormonal primers to simulate early gestational symptoms." I dropped the dossier onto the glass table, letting out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "She faked the pregnancy to force Ethan to finalize the divorce." "Ethan was dragging his feet for 6 months, Chad nodded. "He liked having you at home as his respectable social anchor, while keeping Tiffany on the side as his prize." Tiffany knew that if she didn't corner him with a child, he would eventually get bored and replace her just like he replaced the others. So she manufactured a crisis. And Ethan, in his infinite arrogance, walked right into the trap, I murmured, shaking my head. He threw away 3 years of mutual equity, risked his company's credit line, and signed away 30% of his assets for a phantom baby. "The question is," Chad said, his eyes gleaming with dark amusement, "do you want to expose her now, or let her hang herself on her own rope?" I looked out at the ocean, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. "Let her have her moment in the sun," I smiled coldly. "Ethan's company is hosting the annual Autumn Commerce Gala on Saturday. He's planning to announce their engagement and her pregnancy to the entire business community to reassure his investors. Let him take the stage. The fall will be much more entertaining." From the top. Saturday evening arrived with crisp autumn air and an opulent display of wealth. At the Grand Regal Hotel downtown, Ethan had spared no expense. The ballroom was dripping with white orchids, crystal chandeliers, and ice sculptures carved in the shape of the Ford Enterprises logo. Hundreds of industry leaders, tech founders, and socialites filled the room, sipping vintage champagne and whispering about the sudden shake-up in Ethan Ford's personal life. I arrived at 8 o'clock. I wore a bespoke emerald green silk slip gown by a Parisian atelier that draped loosely over my waist, concealing my slight lower belly curve while highlighting my bare shoulders and back. Around my neck was a simple, flawless teardrop diamond necklace, a gift from Chad's private family collection. As I walked through the arched entrance of the ballroom, the whispers began. Immediately, "Is that Summer?" I thought she was devastated and hiding out after the divorce. "She looks incredible. Who designed that dress?" Across the room, Ethan was standing near the champagne tower, holding a glass, looking slightly haggard beneath his designer tuxedo. Beside him, Tiffany was practically glowing in an ivory lace gown with a dramatic train, her hand resting deliberately on her flat stomach as she accepted congratulations from a circle of polite, curious socialites. When Ethan's eyes found mine across the crowded floor, he froze. His grip tightened on his champagne flute so hard the crystal creaked. His eyes traveled from my face, down the emerald silk of my gown, to the radiant, effortless confidence that radiated from every line of my posture. He hadn't seen me dressed up in over a year. During our marriage, I had downplayed my appearance, dressed conservatively to manage his company's conservative board, and stayed behind the scenes so he could shine. Now, standing in the center of the ballroom, I looked like a queen who had just walked away from a burning village without looking back. Tiffany noticed his distraction, followed his gaze, and her sweet smile curdled into a sharp, tight grimace. She whispered something into Ethan's ear, took his arm, and steered him directly toward me through the parting crowd. "Summer," Tiffany purred, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. I'm so surprised you decided to come tonight. After everything that's happened, we were worried you might feel out of place in this kind of high society setting. Why would I feel out of place, Tiffany? I replied smoothly, taking a flute of sparkling apple cider from a passing waiter's silver tray. I helped draft the bylaws for this annual gala when Ethan was still borrowing money from his college roommates to pay for parking. Ethan's jaw clenched. Summer, what are you doing here? This is a private, corporate celebration for Ford Enterprises. If you're here to cause a scene, because you regret signing the papers. I don't regret a single signature, Ethan. I cut him off, offering a polite, amused smile. In fact, I came as an invited shareholder. You did remember that. Our separation agreement left me with 15% of your non-voting equity, didn't you? Ethan's face darkened. That equity was supposed to be silent. And I've been remarkably quiet, I said. I'm just enjoying the view. Tiffany puffed out her chest, tilting her chin up with triumphant arrogance. Well, Summer, since you're here, you can be the first to congratulate us. Ethan and I are making the official announcement tonight. We're getting married in Hawaii next month, and our little miracle will be born in the spring. It's a shame you never managed to give Ethan a family, but some things are just meant for the right woman. A few nearby guests gasped softly at the sheer, vicious cruelty of the remark. Ethan had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, clearing his throat and looking away. Tiffany, that's enough. No, Ethan, it's the truth, Tiffany insisted, batting her lashes with false innocence. Summer needs to move on. She can't keep hovering around our lives, like a bitter ghost. Before I could reply, a deep, commanding voice cut through the air behind me, like a whip. The only ghost in this room, Mississippi Lane, is your credibility. The crowd parted instantly. Chad Stevenson stepped into the light. He was impeccably tailored in a midnight blue tuxedo with satin lapels, his tall, broad-shouldered frame commanding the entire room without uttering more than a dozen words. He walked straight to my side, casually slid his large, warm hand around my waist, and pulled me flush against his side in a gesture of undeniable, public possession. The entire ballroom went tomb silent. You could hear the faint clinking of ice in glasses 30 feet away. Ethan's face went from pale to red to an ugly mottled gray. S. Stevenson? What is the meaning of this? Chad didn't even look at Ethan. He looked down at me, his thumb lightly stroking the bare skin of my waist, his expression softening with a warmth that was never seen in business journals. You left your wrap in the car, sweetheart, Chad said softly, handing me a plush cashmere shawl. The coastal breeze is picking up outside, and Dr. Eris said you shouldn't get chilled. Dr. Eris? Sweetheart? The whispers exploded like a string of firecrackers across the room. Is Chad Stevenson dating Summer Vance? Wait, Dr. Eris is the city's top fertility and obstetrics specialist. Did Stevenson just call her sweetheart in front of the entire Chamber of Commerce? Tiffany's mouth was open so wide she looked like a landed fish. Mr. Stevenson, you and Summer? That's impossible. She's Ethan's ex-wife. Chad finally turned his gaze to Tiffany. His eyes were cold, clinical, and completely devoid of humanity. Correction, Mississippi Lane. Summer was a woman who wasted 3 years managing a company that would have gone bankrupt in its second quarter if she hadn't secured the Stevenson supply line for them. Chad paused, his voice projecting effortlessly across the silent room. And as of 3 days ago, she is my partner, my equal, and the mother of the future heir to Stevenson Corporation. Boom. If a physical lightning bolt had struck the center of the crystal chandelier, the impact couldn't have been more devastating. Ethan stumbled back half a step, bumping into a waiter who had to scramble to catch a tray of champagne flutes. His eyes bulged as he stared at Chad's hand, resting protectively over my lower abdomen. She's pregnant? Ethan choked out, his voice cracking into a high, humiliated pitch. With your child? Yes, I answered, stepping slightly forward while remaining tucked within Chad's embrace. 6 weeks along. The heartbeat is strong, the vitals are perfect, and the father is very much alive. Ethan's brain seemed to short-circuit. He did the math in his head, the timeline, the birthday dinner he had walked out on, the night he had left me at the restaurant to put on a drone show for Tiffany. 3 months ago. Ethan whispered, his hands trembling violently. My birthday dinner. You were with him. I was at the harbor, watching your fireworks, I replied with a serene, devastating smile. And then Chad found me. He didn't leave me waiting by a melting cake, Ethan. He took me home. You cheated on me. Ethan roared, his professional veneer shattering completely as he lunged forward, pointing an accusing, shaking finger at my face. You were still living under my roof. You were playing the victim while sleeping with my biggest investor. Chad didn't shout. He didn't raise a fist. He simply stepped between Ethan and me, towering over Ethan by half a head, radiating an aura of dangerous, lethal power that made Ethan's bodyguards instinctively freeze in place. "Watch your tone, Ford," Chad said, his voice dropping into a register that made the hair on the back of everyone's neck stand up. "You gave up any right to speak to Summer the moment you sign the 19th revision of your separation agreement. And if you take one more step toward her, my security team will carry you out of your own gala by your collar." "Ethan, don't let them intimidate you," Tiffany shrieked, her face turning purple with humiliation. "They're lying. She's just trying to steal our thunder. I'm the one who's carrying your real baby. I'm the one who matters." Chad gave a quiet, dismissive chuckle that sounded like glass breaking on stone. He reached into his breast pocket, pulled out a small white flash drive and tossed it onto the podium where the evening's presentation laptop was connected. "Go ahead, Julian," Chad said into his lapel microphone. "Run the diagnostic." The 20-foot presentation screen above the stage flickered to life. Instead of the corporate promotional video for Ford Enterprises, the screen displayed a high-resolution scan of a medical report from the Suburban Reproductive Center, dated October 14th. Patient name Tiffany Lane. Primary finding, negative for beta-HCG, not pregnant. Prescription log, progesterone gel and HCG simulation injections. Off-label use. Right below it was a recorded audio file, complete with a time-stamped transcription that began playing through the ballroom's surround sound speakers. It was Tiffany's voice, clear as day, speaking to a private clinic technician. "Just make sure the ultrasound printout shows 6 weeks. I don't care where you get the sample image from. If Ethan doesn't see a heartbeat on that paper by Friday, he's going to reconcile with his ex-wife, and I'm not going back to living on an assistant's salary." The ballroom was so quiet you could hear Tiffany's rapid, panicked hyperventilating. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the massive screen as if his entire reality had been wiped clean with acid. He slowly turned his head to look at Tiffany. You lied to me?" Ethan whispered, the words tumbling out in a ragged, broken gasp. "The morning sickness, the hospital appointments, the ultrasound you showed me at the OBGYN. Ethan, no, it's a fake. Chad fabricated it to ruin us," Tiffany cried, grabbing Ethan's arm with manic desperation, her fake nails digging through his tuxedo sleeve. "You have to believe me. I love you. I did it for us. You did it for my bank account," Ethan realized, his voice trembling with sheer unadulterated disgust. He violently shoved her hands away. Tiffany lost her balance in her high heels, stumbling backward into the 5-tier champagne tower. Crash. The sound of shattering crystal and cascading vintage wine echoed through the hall like an explosion. Tiffany fell onto the soaked carpet, her ivory lace gown drenched in amber liquid, covered in broken glass, weeping hysterically as the socialites she had been trying to impress pulled out their phones to record every single second of her humiliation. Ethan didn't reach down to help her up. He didn't even look at her. He slowly turned around, his eyes wild and bloodshot, searching the crowd for me. "Summer," Ethan croaked, taking 2 stumbling steps forward. "Summer, please. I was blind. I was manipulated. She tricked me. You know I never really wanted to leave you. We built everything together. Please, Summer." I looked at him. The man I had spent my entire youth supporting. The man I had cooked for, cried for, bled for. And looking at him now, standing in the ruins of his own party, drenched in cheap desperation, I felt neither rage nor triumph. I felt only a profound, liberating emptiness. "Ethan," I said softly, my voice carrying clearly over the sound of Tiffany's sobbing. "You didn't lose me because of Tiffany. You lost me because you thought my love was a permanent safety net you could step on whenever you wanted to. Reach for something shiny." I took Chad's arm, leaning my head lightly against his shoulder. "Enjoy your freedom, Ethan. You paid $3 million for it." Chad turned us around, his arm securely around my waist, and guided me toward the grand exit. Behind us, the reporters' flashes were strobing like lightning, capturing the complete, catastrophic collapse of Ethan Ford's empire, while the heavy mahogany doors of the ballroom closed, shutting out the noise forever. 2 weeks after the gala, the business news cycle was dominated by a single headline. Ford Enterprises files for Chapter 11 restructuring after major debt call-in. CEO Ethan Ford ousted by board. Without my management of the logistics contracts, and with Chad's syndicate pulling their debt facilities, Ethan's over-leveraged company had buckled within 14 business days. The board of directors voted unanimously to strip Ethan of his executive powers, liquidating his remaining shares to cover their outstanding liabilities. Tiffany had vanished from the city overnight, facing multiple civil lawsuits for corporate espionage and fraud filed by the firm's minority shareholders. I, on the other hand, spent my mornings sitting on the sunlit terrace of the Stevenson estate, reviewing the quarterly expansion plans for my newly independent supply chain firm, Vance Global Logistics. Chad walked out onto the terrace, wearing a soft gray cashmere sweater carrying a plate of fresh strawberries and a glass of organic pomegranate juice. He set the plate on the glass table, pulled a chair close to mine and rested, his large palm over my stomach, where a distinct, gentle bump was now clearly visible beneath my linen dress. "How are my two favorite people doing today?" he asked, his dark eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. "The baby kicked for the first time this morning." I smiled, placing my hand over his, right after I approved the new maritime shipping contract for Europe. Chad let out a low, proud laugh, leaning down to press a soft kiss against the curve of my belly. "A future CEO already, just like her mother." "Her?" I teased. "You're convinced it's a girl?" "Dr. Eris confirmed the genetics panel an hour ago," Chad said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket and setting it between our plates. "It's a girl. Summer. A healthy, perfect little girl." My breath caught in my throat as I looked at the velvet box. "Chad." He picked up the box, opened the lid, and revealed a breathtaking emerald-cut diamond ring, flanked by two delicate sapphire stones that caught the bright California sunlight like pure ocean water. "I promised you I wouldn't build a cage," Chad said, his voice steady, deep, and filled with an intensity that made my eyes sting with happy tears. "And I never will. This isn't a leash, Summer. It's an anchor. A promise that you will never have to fight for your place, you will never have to beg for loyalty, and you will never be an NPC in someone else's story again." He looked into my eyes, his soul laid bare before me. "Summer Vance, will you marry me?" I looked at the ring, then at the man who had caught me when I was falling, who had given me a fortress when my world was in ruins, and who loved the new life growing inside me with every fiber of his being. I smiled, holding out my left hand. "Yes, Chad," I whispered. "Put the ring on my finger, and let's make it official. At City Hall before lunch." 7 months later, the private maternity suite at the Stevenson Medical Wing was filled with the soft afternoon glow of an early summer sunset. I lay against the propped-up pillows, exhausted but filled with a peace so profound it felt like floating on warm water. In my arms lay a tiny, perfect bundle wrapped in a soft pink blanket. Our daughter, Clara Vance Stevenson. She had a thick head of dark hair, long eyelashes, and tiny, perfect fingers that were currently curled tightly around Chad's thumb. Chad sat on the edge of the bed, his tie discarded, his eyes wet with tears as he stroked Clara's soft cheek with the back of his finger. "She has your nose, Summer," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "And your stubborn chin. She has your calm eyes." I smiled, leaning my head against his shoulder. "Thank God for that. One stubborn person in this house is enough." A gentle knock sounded at the door. Chad's assistant, Julian, stepped in quietly, carrying a small leather portfolio and a bouquet of white peonies. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Stevenson," Julian said with a respectful bow. "Everything is quiet outside. The press release has been issued, and the Stevenson Foundation has funded the new neonatal pediatric wing in Clara's honor." "Thank you, Julian," Chad nodded. "Any lingering issues?" Julian hesitated for a brief second, glancing at me. "Ethan Ford came to the lobby downstairs about an hour ago. He brought a bouquet of cheap daisies and asked if he could see Mrs. Stevenson for 2 minutes just to apologize in person." I looked down at our daughter, sleeping peacefully against my chest, her tiny chest rising and falling in rhythmic perfection. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel triumphant. Ethan Ford was simply a man from a chapter of a book I had finished reading a long time ago. "Tell him the hospital is private property," I said calmly. "And tell security to give the flowers to the front desk." "Understood, ma'am." Julian smiled, bowed, and stepped out, closing the heavy wooden door behind him. Chad leaned in, wrapping his strong arms around both me and our daughter, pulling us close against his chest. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights were beginning to flicker on along the bay, glowing bright and steady against the darkening sky. The past was gone, washed away by the tide, and in its place was a love that was loud, true, and entirely our own.